think it's clear now that Göbekli Tepe itself was the end of a process, not the beginning of a process. It was something that marked, it was a marker. It was something that brought together the best of everything that they'd accumulated.
They told us Göbekli Tepe was the world's first temple. But what if it wasn't a place of worship, but an astronomical warning system? Göbekli Tepe wasn't just a ring of ancient symbolic pillars. It was built to align with the stars.
I don't think anybody knows how they did it, how they lifted those stones, how they brought them up to that level. I think we're looking, again, at a lost technology.
Some pillars align with constellations, while others may mark the path of a comet that triggered an extinction-level event over thousands of years ago. And the site wasn't just buried, it was deliberately hidden. But before his sudden death, Klaus Schmidt, the man who uncovered it, quietly confessed he no longer believed it was just a temple. He suspected something far more unsettling was encoded in stone. So, was Göbekli Tepe really a temple? Or was it a warning message to the future generations? The world's first temple. Klaus Schmidt was no ordinary archaeologist. He was one of the world's leading experts on prehistoric cultures, with a deep obsession for the origins of human society. And he didn't believe in coincidences, not when it came to a place like Göbekli Tepe. From the moment he laid eyes on the hilltop site in southeastern Turkey, he sensed there was something extraordinary buried beneath the soil. What began as scattered fragments and half-buried stones soon revealed themselves to be the pieces of an enormous, carefully constructed structure. Massive T-shaped limestone pillars arranged in perfect circles, some rising nearly 18 feet high. And as the carvings on those pillars came to light, foxes, vultures, wild boar, and stylized human forms, it became clear to Schmidt that this was more than just an early settlement. It was something else entirely. In his words, it was a sacred place, a temple. This belief wasn't just rooted in instinct. It came from what wasn't found at the site. Unlike other Neolithic locations, Göbekli Tepe lacked ovens, homes, trash pits, or everyday tools associated with domestic life. There were no signs of farming or permanent settlement. Instead, there were bones from wild animals and thousands of stone tools. Evidence of feasting, hunting, and construction, but not daily routine. For Schmidt, the absence of domestic life was the loudest clue. People didn't live here. They came here for something. And the scale of what they built suggested a purpose bigger than any individual or tribe. Schmidt came to a bold conclusion. Göbekli Tepe wasn't just old. It was the oldest known temple in the world, over 11,000 years old, predating metal, pottery, and agriculture. That alone turned everything archaeologists thought they knew about human history upside down. For decades, the standard narrative had been clear. First came farming, then settlements, then religion, temples, and cities. But Göbekli Tepe flipped that script. Schmidt believed the urge to worship, to gather for ritual and ceremony, came first. People who still hunted wild animals and had never sown a crop somehow united to build vast stone enclosures, decorated with mysterious symbols and carved beasts. In Schmidt's view, these were not simply aesthetic choices. They were spiritual expressions, shared across a culture that had no written language but still carried deep meaning. What drove these early people then, if not survival? For Schmidt, the answer was belief. A shared devotion to unseen forces, a desire to connect with the divine or the otherworldly. And if that idea sounds simple, the implications are not. Because if belief predates agriculture, then it may have caused agriculture. Schmidt speculated that the intense cooperation required to construct Göbekli Tepe may have eventually pushed these nomadic groups to settle permanently, just to sustain the workforce. Farming, in this sense, was a solution, not a starting point. They planted crops not because they wanted food, but because they needed a way to stay close to the sacred. And here's where Schmidt's view truly rewrites the origin story of civilization. If people came together to worship before they came together to live, then temples weren't luxuries built on surplus. They were the reason people created communities at all. The very act of gathering, carving, building, and burying became a form of collective identity, rooted in shared spiritual purpose. Schmidt called Göbekli Tepe a cathedral on a hill, not a metaphor. A literal spiritual center built by hands that had never touched a plow. As archaeologists continued to uncover more of the site, Schmidt remained committed to this theory. Each carved animal, each buried enclosure, each massive stone added to the weight of his conviction. Ritual came before routine, faith before farming. And in that reversal, Göbekli Tepe became more than an archaeological marvel. It became a window into the human soul at its earliest known moment. And if Schmidt was right, then everything we thought we knew about the start of civilization might need to be reconsidered. Because this wasn't just a temple. It may have been the spark that lit the fire of everything that followed. While Klaus Schmidt believed it was the world's first temple, others began entertaining a more cosmic idea. What if this site, carved at the dawn of the Holocene, had something to do with the stars? Was Göbekli the first ever astronomical observatory? The idea of Göbekli Tepe as an ancient observatory didn't come from fringe enthusiasts alone. Over time, a few independent researchers began pointing to patterns, alignments between the site's towering pillars and celestial bodies. One of the most persistent claims suggested a link between the layout of certain enclosures and the star Sirius, which was revered in later cultures throughout the ancient Near East. Others argued that carvings on one particular pillar, Pillar 43, often referred to as the Vulture Stone, encoded the memory of a catastrophic comet strike around 10,800 BC. According to this theory, the people of Göbekli Tepe were recording events written in the sky. It's easy to see why the idea caught on. You know, Göbekli Tepe predates Stonehenge, the Egyptian pyramids, and every other megalithic structure known to humanity. If it did serve an astronomical function, it would be the oldest known observatory on Earth by a wide margin. The theory was bold and romantic, an image of prehistoric humans not just surviving, but scanning the heavens for meaning. It suggested that long before cities rose or crops were sown, people were already watching the skies and making sense of what they saw. But the archaeologists who've spent decades excavating Göbekli Tepe remain skeptical. Their concerns aren't rooted in arrogance or dismissal, but in the challenges of working with a site that has seen 12,000 years of erosion, tampering, and rebuilding. Over time, some of the site's stones were moved, reused, or fractured by natural forces. Later civilizations and even modern farmers disturbed and rearranged portions of the site. While researchers have worked carefully to return the stones to their probable original positions, there's no definitive map of how everything was initially laid out. That makes confirming any specific astronomical alignment nearly impossible. Then there's the structure itself. The circular enclosures at Göbekli Tepe weren't open-air arenas. The presence of anchoring marks and architectural features strongly suggests they were roofed. And that alone complicates any idea of stargazing. If these spaces were enclosed in darkness, their purpose might have been inward-facing, spiritual, and symbolic, rather than built for watching the stars wheel above. Still, the allure of the observatory theory hasn't faded. In 2017, two chemical engineers proposed that Pillar 43 actually recorded the date of a comet strike that may have contributed to the sudden cooling of Earth's climate during the Younger Dryas period. They argued that the animals carved into the stone mirrored the constellations in the sky at the time, functioning like a prehistoric star map. Their work made headlines, stirring renewed public interest. But the Göbekli Tepe excavation team pushed back. They pointed out that the cultural constellations we recognize today, like Orion or Scorpio, are not timeless truths. They're human inventions, shaped by geography, storytelling, and tradition. To assume the builders of Göbekli Tepe saw the night sky exactly as we do now is, in their view, a stretch too far. And yet, buried within the skepticism is a quiet acknowledgement. Not everything at Göbekli Tepe has been explained. The carvings are undeniably symbolic. The patterns and repetitions across the site hint at an underlying order. And while no one has definitively tied the structures to celestial movements, the possibility hasn't been entirely ruled out either. Sometimes it's the absence of certainty that makes a theory compelling. Perhaps the real story lies somewhere in between. Göbekli Tepe may not have been an observatory in the strictest sense, but that doesn't mean its builders ignored the sky. In the rhythms of the seasons, the migrations of animals, and the cycles of light and darkness, early humans were constantly in conversation with the cosmos. Whether or not they etched those conversations into stone is still a mystery, but what's clear is that they saw themselves as part of a larger world, one shaped not just by the land under their feet, but by the vast expanse above their heads. As for Pillar 43, its carvings remain open to interpretation. A vulture, a scorpion, abstract shapes, and strange lines. Maybe they marked a story, or a ritual, or a warning passed through generations. Klaus Schmidt once said that the symbols carved at Göbekli Tepe were not decorative. They meant something. What exactly, we may never know. But in trying to decipher them, we come closer not only to understanding their builders, but also to questioning what those early people found important enough to immortalize in stone. Whether they worshipped the sky or honored the dead, one thing's clear. Göbekli Tepe wasn't the work of scattered tribes. It came from people who knew what they were doing. So who were they? Who built Göbekli? When Klaus Schmidt began unearthing the immense stone rings of Göbekli Tepe, he was stepping into the story of an ancient people we still barely understand. The structures were staggering in size, the carvings astonishing in detail, and the coordination it all required felt impossibly ahead of its time. Without written records or evidence of kings, cities, or armies, one central question has lingered for decades. Who were the people that built this? As more of Göbekli Tepe was uncovered, the earliest guesses pointed to nomadic hunter-gatherers. The logic seemed sound. There were no signs of permanent dwellings or fields. The site sits on a dry mountaintop, and its builders didn't leave behind a script or system of governance. But over time, the evidence began to push archaeologists in a new direction. Grinding stones and cooking vessels showed up in surprising numbers. Cisterns revealed sophisticated water collection systems. Rectangular buildings near the main enclosures hinted at habitation. Something more complex was happening here. These weren't fleeting visitors, and they weren't just there to pray and leave. What emerged instead was a picture of a people living in transition, still hunting and foraging, but slowly forming more permanent communities. They gathered not only to worship, but to share, organize, and create. Archaeologists now believe the builders of Göbekli Tepe belonged to a semi-sedentary society teetering on the edge of domestication. They weren't yet farming full-time, but they had begun cultivating wild grains and herding animals. Life was still raw and unpredictable, but it was becoming more rooted. Still, even with a clearer understanding of their lifestyle, one puzzle remains. How did a society without formal rulers pull off such a monumental feat? According to archaeologist Lee Clare, the answer might lie in the power of charisma. He proposes that early communities like those at Göbekli Tepe were led not by institutions, but by individuals. These were not pharaohs or kings, but people who earned influence, through knowledge, through ritual, through skill. Three types of figures may have risen as natural leaders: the hunter, the storyteller, and the ritually adept. These were the ones who could unite groups during large seasonal gatherings when construction surged and feasting followed. The shamans, who interpreted death and the cosmos. The storytellers, who preserved clan memory and oral traditions. And the hunters, who brought back dangerous game and carried the respect that came with risk. These roles, deeply respected, formed the closest thing Göbekli Tepe had to a social elite. Some of the evidence left behind supports this idea. Stone carvings depict powerful predators in striking poses: leopards, boars, and foxes, often with ribs exposed, possibly tied to rituals of excarnation or death. The now famous vulture stone, with its strange depiction of a headless human and birds of prey, has long been interpreted as a symbolic portrayal of death myths. There are no tombs here, no named gods, but the imagery pulses with significance. It's easy to imagine these stories being told around fires, with the storytellers passing down lessons carved in stone. One particularly revealing discovery came at the nearby Sabers site, where a relief shows a man flanked by two leopards, seemingly mid-ritual. The object in his hand, once thought to be a snake, is now believed to be a severed part of a bull's anatomy, suggesting an initiation rite or test of strength. Scenes like this hint at a society that honored bravery and marked transitions with ritual performance. Göbekli Tepe continues to challenge everything we thought we knew about our past. And Klaus Schmidt's final insights might just be the key to unlocking its true story. As more is uncovered, the mystery only deepens. What else could still be buried beneath that ancient hill? If this left you curious, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.